That's right. Well, our guest today, and she is beautiful inside and out. She's a psychologist and author, Dr. Tresmaine Grimes, and she's here to offer hope and strength to those dealing with fertility and infertility challenges. Welcome, Dr. Grimes.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you, Ken. It is such a pleasure to be here with you.
It's an honor for us to meet you.
And it's always a pleasure to get out of New York City.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's snowing right now, so I'm glad to be here.
Well, we've had the privilege of being there a few times.
Yes.
I said New York is like many of our communities around the country. It's a great place to visit.
Absolutely.
Exciting place to go to. But I'm always happy to get back to Central Florida.
Well, you know, New York is my home, so I can't talk about it too badly.
That's right.
I like
right.
home.
It is an exciting place.
Yes,
and,
it is.
But you, like so many others, wherever they live, suffered with infertility issues.
I did, absolutely.
And tell us about that journey that you had.
Well, you know, it's an interesting experience, unexpected, of course. You get married and think, okay, we'll have children when we're ready to have children. And I was 25, and my husband's older than I am. So I was like, okay, give me a minute. I was still in school, and eventually said, okay, let's try. And unfortunately, nothing was working. And when we were able to conceive, no pregnancy lasted. And so we went to doctors and did all of the routines, and they were somewhat cheerful about it and said, okay, well, we'll give it a season of trying. And then I got a change in diagnosis that I had a problem with one of my fallopian tubes, and then time progressed and I had surgery for that, or I went into surgery for that. First miracle, I talk about it in the book. And they went in and found that everything was fine and closed me back up, so I thought for sure we'll have some children. And it never happened. And so along the way, I met other couples in the church who were having the same kinds of problems. And I felt like it was something nobody was really talking about, and really wanted to minister to that area once that part of my life had passed.
And that's part of the reason why, I guess, Dr. Grimes, that you wrote this book called Sarah's Daughter. And I read every page of it front to back.
Thank you.
Because of having gone through infertility issues, and because of what you're talking about, inferring to the fact that there were very few people to talk to about it. There was not a help group in my church. There may have been another friend that I could talk to who was also going through it, but little by little, people around me would get pregnant, and I would not. For 13 years, Dr. Grimes, I suffered with infertility. Month by month by month. I was sure that's going to be the month. And I even prayed and asked God to take away that desire in me to have a child, another child. I already had one, but I wanted a second one badly, and it took me 13 years to conceive. But I prayed that God would take away that desire if it was not from Him. And He said, I will give you the desires of your heart. And so I believed that I would eventually have another child, which I did. But tell us about the writing of Sarah's Daughters, why it's such a book, what prompted you to write it, and how it will minister to other infertile people.
Well, it's good for me to hear that it was something as a shared experience, so thank you for sharing that. I think I wrote the book because, like many women who've gone through the experience, or couples who've gone through the experience, we came to the end without a baby. And so you watch couples like yourselves, and it takes you a long time, and you know we're rooting for you because we want you to have that baby just as much as you do. But there are some of us who at the end of the journey don't. And so the book was really to speak to those couples, to say, you know what, you're still okay. Because I think many times the couples begin to feel like there's something wrong with them, that God is punishing them, that they have committed some egregious error, some heinous sin, and because of that, He's withholding the desires of their heart. So even though it was a desire of my heart, and even though God does give me the desires of my heart, He didn't give me that one.
Well, how do you reconcile that? Because I know you talk about it in your book, how God tells us our quivers are going to be full. And so to me, until I read your book, it meant I'm going to have 4 or 5 babies. I'm going to have a quiver full of babies, which I did not and you did not. So how do you reconcile it?
What reconciled it for me was 2 things, I think. First, coming to grips with the fact that my will and God's will are 2 separate things, and that I needed to bring my life into His will. If this were His will, it would have happened. As you
Yes,
said,
that's
13 years,
Right.
all kinds of obstacles. People would have told you give up. But God said he would do it, and he did it.
Right.
And so for me, what became clear was if it was not happening, then perhaps it was not his will. And what solidified it for me was being in a women's conference. And it was high praise and worship, and we were being told, I think, to pray for the things that we desired. And of course, that baby came up again. And during the praise and worship, I heard God say so clearly, "Will you still love me if I tell you no?"
Wow. Wow.
And of course, I got very quiet. But then the first answer was the best answer. Of course, I'll still love you. And once I made peace that I was still going to love God no matter what, then I was able to begin to heal and say, you know what, maybe this wasn't his will. I don't understand, but I'm going to keep living and see what he does. And all these years later, I can tell you, my quiver is full.
Yes.
I have a lot of children.
That's right.
They did not come from my womb.
Right.
But someone said to me as a prophetic word a while ago, you couldn't give birth to all of the children God is going to have for you.
Wow.
I have students who call me mom just randomly,
Wow.
and they come to me and they stick with me. People who will say to me, "You're my spiritual mother," and I'll go, "Really? What in the world made you think that?" But there's something that God has done beyond childbearing that I am so grateful for. And on one level, when I watched my granddaughter's birth, I said, you know, I don't know if I have a problem with not going through that. It's okay. It's okay. 24 hours of labor later, she's a beautiful baby. But
that's going to confuse people because you talked about not having children.
Yes.
Now, tell us about the one child or the children that you have.
I was very blessed to have a husband who, before we married, we agreed we were going to adopt children no matter what. We both have a very similar mind about children. We love them. He was teaching at the time. And I always wanted to have a bunch of kids. I said to myself as a young girl, I want 12 children.
Wow.
But I only want to have like 1 or 2. But I love children. I love baby stage. I don't know, that's crazy, I guess.
No,
but I
it is.
love them, love to be around them.
too.
And so I had always said I wanted my spouse to want the same thing. So he agreed before we got married, we will adopt. We started out actually with a foster son after 2 years of marriage who was 16. And he was certainly good training for us in terms of parenting. So every problem we could face as parents, we faced them early on. But we decided to adopt, and we went through the procedure and got our first child, our daughter. And a few months later, we found out she had a brother, and a birth brother, a natural brother, and we were asked if we would take him as well. And so we did, and those are our 2, and it's our daughter who has her own daughter now, and I got to watch that delivery. So
So then, as you went through this journey,
yes,
because you and your husband had already decided that you're going to adopt children.
yes, no matter what.
Now, was there any finger pointing during the time when you couldn't have
No.
children? I mean, is it your fault? Is it your fault? Because many times I think that happens in marriages today where there's a lot of finger pointing.
I think one of the blessings was that I have a husband who wouldn't point a finger. And I think one of the real interesting blessings was that at some point they really couldn't tell why we weren't conceiving. Because all of the things that they thought were wrong were fixed, and we still didn't conceive. So you really couldn't point a finger at anyone except God to say, I guess this is not what he wants.
But there is finger pointing in society, and you do address some of that in your book. And I can remember one of the most painful things to me was somebody telling me I was too thin, and that was why I wasn't conceiving, or I'm exercising too much, and that's why I'm not conceiving. And you talk about people saying, well, there's sin in your life, and that's why you're not conceiving. Talk to us about that. Tell our viewers how harmful that is to try to give that kind of advice.
I think, thank you for saying that, Barbara. One of the things I heard was that I was too fat to conceive. So either you're too thin or you're too fat. And I would look at other women who were bigger than me, and I would say, but she got pregnant, so how could it be that I'm just too big? I think one of the worst things that people can do is speak in ignorance.